It's time, everyone. We're back for another episode of On the Perf podcast, brought to you by Atlas Gunworks. Atlas Gunworks, it's that time of year. We're in that time of year where you probably need to change your mag springs or get some new mags. So head on over there. We're also probably in the era of a new Perfect Zero website. So all things 1911 parts and accessories wise over on Perfect Zero. So go check that out. We're also brought to you by Briley Manufacturing, makers of all things shotgun, action shotgun shooting. We are in the spin up for the World Shoot Year. The teams have been selected and everyone has their eyes on Greece. And so probably a lot of interest in Briley products this year as people get ready to make the journey across the pond. As always, with me here is Mr. Riser. How are we doing today, buddy?
We're doing all right, buddy. We're doing all right. We're in a good place.
We're in a good place?
We're doing all right, yeah.
All right. Well, it's my favorite time, your favorite time, everyone's favorite time. It's time for that Gary of the Day.
Oh, my God. So, homeboy at the range.
I have no idea where this is going.
This was several years ago now. I'm at a public shooting range. There's always, if you want to see some Garys. And this guy had a few boxes of 9mm, and then he had one box of 9mm that was like the brass color, or not the brass color, but the silver colored brass. So what do you actually call it? Is that nickel plated?
Oh, yeah.
Nickel
plated brass.
So nickel plated brass. And he would this dude.
I have no idea where this is going. You have me in nickel braid. I'm all right on the edge of my seat.
This guy, every single mag, he would put in one nickel plated round and then fill it up with regular ammo. And then one nickel plated round. And not like there was nickel plated ammo mixed in. Like he was very intentionally doing this. He had a box of nickel plated and a couple boxes of the regular stuff. And so finally, I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Why is there one nickel-plated round in every mag? And he goes, oh, that's how I know the gun's empty.
What?
I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, because I see it when it flies out, it looks different than all the rest of them, so I know that the gun's empty.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I'm like, first of all, I have never been consciously aware of the brass leaving my gun. If you're seeing the brass exit your gun, you are looking at the wrong things.
Definitely not target focused.
Also, the gun lets you know, dude, the slide locks open. It tells you there is a feeling and a physical and a visual indication that your gun is empty. I don't know, man. Like,
that's some old guy shit.
Some people just cannot be helped, dude. They just can't. Yeah. That dude is gearing it up real hard.
Candy cane in your mag so that you know when the last round is.
Yeah.
And that nickel-plated brass is not cheap, so he's spending extra money to do this. That's wild.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was pretty next level. That was probably 15 years ago now, and I've never seen anything like that since then.
I'll take shit that doesn't matter for 500, Alex.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, today we got a topic for you guys. I think Riser wants to talk about ballistics calculators and long-range shooting.
Yeah. So in all the rifle classes that I teach, not even in those, just generally being on the range talking to people, people don't really understand how ballistics works, how ballistics calculators work, even really how your bullet flies through the air when you're shooting. And it's very important to understand all of these things. So we're just going to run through it really quick. This will probably be a pretty short episode, and won't be all of the shenanigans that we normally have, but I'm sure we'll find a place for a little shit talk here and there. But we're just going to kind of go through a little bit of quick stuff about what happens to your bullet when it leaves the barrel and how a ballistics calculator can tell you how to deal with that stuff. And for the record, everyone who's like, oh, well, I don't want to drop a bunch of money on a ballistics calculator, or I'm not good enough to need one, or I don't shoot far enough to need one, or whatever. First, they're like $12. They're super cheap apps. If you're into guns enough to listen to this podcast, you should definitely have one on your phone. There are a lot of options out there. I am currently running one called Chair Gun Elite, which is the newer version of Straylock, because Straylock was done by a Russian firm. So when all of that stuff kicked off, it pretty much got banned in the United States, and Chair Gun popped up and took its place. I used to run the Applied Ballistics app, and then they changed it, and they quite honestly made it so complicated that I couldn't figure out how to run it again. And so I stopped, and I was like, I'm just going to go back to this. They're all pretty much running, as far as I can tell, kind of the same formula. Like, it's just math behind this.
Well,
thing.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, you and I were watching Django together the other night, and this
such a good movie.
The scene where they whip out that Sharps rifle from time to time, and like, people are pretty convinced that this stuff is just this side of black magic.
Yeah,
and really, it's just math.
Yep,
it's literally just math and science. Like, the calculators have taken all the special out of long. We're like back in the Dizzy. Or even as close as maybe the 80s or the 90s?
I mean, certainly, like, when I started shooting long-range stuff at all, and before ballistics calculators were a thing, you would shoot your gun at 100 yards, then you would go back to 200 yards, and you would shoot it, and you would measure the drop, and then you go back to 300 yards, and you'd shoot it, and you'd measure it. And it was a nightmare to get data. And this is like, you shoot at 100 yards, you shoot past the chronograph, you punch in some stuff, and you will be plus or minus a couple inches out to like 600 yards with the 223, like, on your first shot.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing how good they are.
Yeah, like those old school guys who could shoot long range. Yeah,
they were wizards.
They had some talent, and they had some special.
Yep.
But really, the technology has taken all the special out of it. I used Straylock too. That was one of the first ones that I became aware of. And then Vortex came out with a product that had applied ballistics integrated into it. So we had the Fury binocular that had applied ballistics into it. So I started using applied ballistics because that was what we were doing. And then essentially we were using that product under license. And then Vortex had the opportunity to buy Geo Ballistics as the lock, stock, and barrel. And so Geo Ballistics, the technology and all that stuff, was acquired by Vortex, and now that's our technology. So all of our ballistic stuff is Geo Ballistics. So the same app is out there. From my understanding, there was a Pro unlock that you used to have to buy. Mm-hmm. Now, and that's still out there. But you also magically get a Pro unlock as soon as you pair it with a Vortex product.
Oh, that's pretty
cool.
Nice.
So yeah, if all you really need to do to get access to the full unlock of Geo Ballistics is pair it with a Geo Ballistics capable Vortex rangefinder, and you have the app for life.
Sick.
So, but yeah, that's the one that I use. I use Geo Ballistics the most. Actually, recently got trained on the newest version of it. They kind of have been playing with the interface a little bit now, but in the limited amount of long range shooting that I do, I use it quite a bit. I used it at PCSL Nationals this year, trying to figure out that long paper shot. Just, actual muzzle velocity, actual zero distance, how much actual drop up or down are we going to have?
Yep.
Actually, once you have it, it's one of those things that you get out of it what you put into it.
Oh, 100%.
So if you put in rough estimates and approximations is what you're going to get.
Yes.
The more detail-oriented information you put in there, the more precise it is.
And it's not that hard to get this information. This is all pretty straightforward stuff. So
yeah.
So we're going to start really quick with what's happening to your bullet when it leaves the barrel, because I think it's important for people to understand that.
It falls to earth.
It falls to earth. Like, literally that's the good starting point, because we've all seen that chart of the bullet leaving the barrel and the bullet rising to the top of its arc and then falling back down. That's a graph interpretation of what's actually happening. What's really happening is as soon as your bullet leaves the barrel, it is falling. How fast is your bullet falling? At the speed of gravity. The reason that the bullet doesn't just fall out of the end of the barrel and hit the earth is because it has velocity to push it forward. But if you just hold out a bullet at your muzzle height and you let go of it, that is how fast your bullet is falling as it travels through the air. But it is also covering distance while it is doing that. So that essentially is what gives you that arc. So it's not actually an arc, it's just falling away. The reason it's interpreted as an arc is because the chart is basically drawn with your scope level, and your scope is not actually parallel to your barrel, because if it was, your barrel and your aiming point on your scope would never actually meet. So your scope is pointing slightly down, even if you don't have a, negative 15 or 20 or whatever minute of angle rail. Your scope is pointing ever so slightly down in order for your line of sight of your scope to meet your line of sight of your barrel. So even if those two are physically lined up when they're mounted to the rifle, the reticle in the scope has to come down a little bit in order to meet that. So I hope we're all on the same page. So your scope is looking slightly down, your rifle is pointing straight forward. As you shoot farther out, your scope will be always pointing in a straight line, because your scope doesn't travel in an arc, your scope travels in a straight line. And then your gun is going to be pointed slightly up. That is why your bullet actually flies in an arc when you're shooting it at longer distances. But it doesn't leave the barrel and then climb, as some people have been led to believe by the graph. So gravity is affecting your bullet. As soon as it leaves, gravity is pushing it down. Wind is pushing it side to side. The rotation of the bullet itself, which is called spin drift, so think about throwing a football, can actually make the bullet drift in one direction, but that isn't really applicable to our sport. Neither are things like the Coriolis effect. You can sound really fancy if you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but if you're shooting inside of 1,000 yards, that does not matter. The other thing that impacts it is barometric pressure. Relative humidity doesn't actually really impact bullet flight. Temperature and barometric pressure, the combination of those two things, kind of does. Barometric pressure especially. So those are essentially going to be your inputs. You're going to figure out where your scope is relative to your rifle, the twist weight of your barrel, the velocity that bullet is leaving with, the ballistic coefficient, essentially how well the bullet flies, so the projectile itself, and then the external things that impact that in flight, basically being the distance to the target, relative wind, temperature, and barometric pressure. And for those who don't know, altitude and barometric pressure kind of are intermingled. You can have different barometric pressures at the same altitude, but if you go up and down in altitude, it'll also change barometric pressure. So they kind of play against each other a little bit. So in the calculator itself, I have mine open here. There is going to be a handful of things that you're going to want to put in for the gun in terms of information, and then there's going to be a handful of things that you're going to put in for the ammunition, and then there's going to be some external factors, and then there is a validation process. So this is what you need to know. I'm just going to go down the list of things. So these are in no particular order, other than I guess they're in a particular order because they're in the order that they are in Straylock. They're going to be a different order. Hang on a second. Still a bit of a cough. They're going to be in a different order in all apps, but they are going to be the same thing. The zero distance. So literally the distance you zero your gun at. If you listen to this, you know I zero my gun at 100 yards. Well, I zero my rifles at 100 yards anyways. Your scope height. So this is the height of the reticle or the middle of your scope relative to the middle of your bore. Shockingly, you can be pretty close here. I would say within like 0.2 and still be pretty much all right. The closer you can get, the better. Take some calipers, figure out where the middle of your bore is, find the very center of your turret cap, measure from that down to the middle of your bore. That should give you your scope height. Do you have a better solution to that one?
In Geoballistics, they actually developed a way that you can do this with your camera.
Ooh,
so
that's pretty sick.
Essentially, there's a function. I can't readily show it to Riser in a way that won't be bad radio. But essentially, you kind of establish the line of the center of the bore of your scope, and then you have some sliders and draggers that you can drag down to your barrel. And like a colleague of mine who does a lot of long range shooting, he's like, I hate that thing. It's not very accurate. To me, it's pretty accurate. And most of the people who call in on the phone are taking their velocity off the box of ammunition. So
yeah, we'll get to that.
it gets you pretty dang close unless you're doing really technical stuff, at which case you should probably use your own, again, approximate. If you put in approximations is what you will get. So they do have a way to roughly estimate height over bore with a camera in the GeoBallistics app.
Gotcha.
Works pretty good for like AR-15s or hunting rifles.
Well, and this is the thing. Like, if you're a PRS guy, this number needs to be super accurate. Yeah. If you're shooting 3-gun, this will be within the margin of error.
Oh, yeah. So, If you're hunting deer,
totally
it's 2
fine.
times within the margin of error.
You just need a minute of deer, you're good. The next thing is your vertical and horizontal clicks. So you will set, for mine is 0.10 MRAD. So essentially on the scope is you're making adjustments in the app. You want those adjustments to reflect what's actually happening to your scope in real life. And then most of the good ones these days will have a reticle option, so you can actually select. So for my Gen 3 1-10, I have an EBR9 MRAD reticle and a front focal plane. So when I open up the app, I see the actual reticle that is in my scope, which is super handy. And then there is an option to select either front focal plane or second focal plane. If you do not know, front focal plane basically means that your reticle grows and shrinks as you zoom in and out, which means that the subtensions in that reticle stay accurate at all magnifications. If you have a second focal plane scope, like a Razor 1-6, then it is the subtensions are correct at only one magnification, usually, and especially in this case, the highest magnification. So you can set second focal plane, set what the minimum magnification is. So in this case, it would be 1, and then the high magnification would be 6, and then you set what the max magnification is, or what the correct magnification is, rather. So that way, if you have a second focal plane scope and it's a 4-12 and you're dialed to 9, you can actually look in your calculator and it will fix all of those subtensions for you and tell you what your hold should be, even though your magnification isn't exactly what it should be in reality.
Yeah, common misconception in second focal plane scopes is that like you can only use the drops on a specific magnification. That's a really dumbed down way to say it. It always is. It's not complete gibberish on other magnifications. It's just not particularly clean math to do, and it's not particularly useful for anything. So it's really hard to do on the fly, and the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So unless you have an app like this kind of doing it for you, where like in GeoBallistics, there's a slider in one of the reticle views that basically show you what your subtensions mean at different magnifications. Outside of having a tool like that, this is very cumbersome math to do, but it is important if you're using a second focal plane scope.
Yep. And then the last thing that will usually be in there is twist rate. For most ARs, they're going to have a 1-in-8 twist barrel. Some are a 1-in-9 or a 1-in-10 or a 1-in-7.5. But I would say if you don't know, 1-in-8 is a pretty darn good guess.
Most quality AR barrels are stamped.
Yeah.
It's stamped on the outside.
Yeah, I can't imagine any that aren't. And you'll notice that barrel length is not one of these things, because the length doesn't matter. What matters is the velocity. So that's it for inputs for the gun portion. They're all pretty straightforward. Most of these things you can learn by just reading the side of whatever it is that you're looking at. You have to make one measurement, and you're basically done.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward. So then we get into the actual bullet that is being fired. What it will ask for is bullet length, bullet diameter. A 223 is actually 0.224, boys and girls. And then your bullet weight in grains. I shoot 69. Nice. Sierra Match Kings. And then the ballistic coefficient of your bullet. So there's a couple weird things here. So bullet length, you could measure this with calipers if you so choose. There is most calculators these days will have kind of a bullet library, so you can actually scroll down and just like pull your bullet, and it will just pluck all of this information for you.
That's what I was going to jump in and say is like, on geoballistics and applied ballistics, there's a bullet library where you go down Hornady, caliber, grain weight, and then it pre-populates some of this information for you. Well, all this information for you. The one that you have to maybe true is ballistic coefficient. We'll probably get to that.
Yep. So then that will give you a ballistic coefficient. It will ask for your drag function, either G1 or G7. Essentially, if you're shooting pointy things, it is a G7. If you're shooting things shaped like potatoes, it is a G1. There's more than that, but that's all you need to know. Rifles are G7, pistols are G1. And yes, I have ballistic function for my pistol because we do things in 3-gun, like shoot at 150-yard targets sometimes, and I want to know how much to hold over. Then there is going to be a bullet speed spot. Now, your bullet speed is not number on the side of the box when you buy your ammunition. Please don't use that. Find somebody with a chronograph. You know somebody. Shoot your bullet past a chronograph and find out how fast it is actually going. Don't fire 1. Fire like 5 to 10 and get an average.
So the numbers on the box are fired out of, what's it called? A proof barrel, a proofing barrel, or a
Yeah, I can remember what they call it, but it's
fired from a fixture.
Yeah,
it's not a real.
It's not a real
barrel, really. Yeah. For practical intents and purposes. So standard for caliber in 223 is 24 inches. All right, go ahead, show of hands. How many of us are shooting 24-inch barrels? Okay, so
and it's coming out of a bolt action.
Yeah, so those are for SAMI spec purposes that they shoot those. You want an actual muzzle velocity out of yours, even if you know somebody who's shooting a similar gun. This is an aspect where every gun is an individual.
Well, even different barrels of the same length and profile will have slightly different velocities.
And barrels as they wear out.
Yeah.
Some will, because barrels are consumable.
Yep.
And so like and then a chronograph is a tool that essentially, using some form of magic, essentially can measure how fast your bullet is actually going. These used to be fairly crude devices, and then there was kind of a Doppler like radar kind of thing. Or no, that's not correct. Yeah. But there's kind of that was the bee's knees for a while. Like, man, you weren't cool if you didn't have one of those.
Oh, I had one of those big orange things. That was the only instrument of any type that I've ever owned that I read the entire manual every time I used it.
Yeah.
Super complicated.
Now, Garmin cracked the code. They basically made one the size of a GoPro on a little tripod.
Yeah.
And you basically just like plop that thing down on the table next to where you're shooting, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very accurate for what it is. It's very simple to use. I don't like these kinds of things. I use them all the time. There's 4 buttons. It's not that tough.
Yeah.
Normally when I measure muzzle velocity, I shoot at least 5, if not 10. And then my good buddy Ruben, he oftentimes says, throw out the highest, throw out the lowest.
Fair enough.
That's usually how I do that, depending on how detailed I am.
Isn't that what standard deviation does automatically?
Well, to even like shrink down your standard deviation a little bit tighter.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. He's better at long range shooting than I am, so I just kind of did what he said.
Fair enough. So yeah, so you get your bullet speed. So mine is, I'm shooting 2735, and then it says at temperature. So this is if you are shooting very temperature sensitive powders, which I kind of go out of my way not to do with rifles, but everything changes a little bit, or anything really. But
tight wad, don't use tight wad. Tight wad is bad. For what we do.
Clean shot, it turns out, is also reverse temperature sensitive, but very little. Like I actually haven't. My minor stuff kind of does it in everything, so it's just fine. Anyways,
tight wad is as temperature sensitive as a valley girl.
Yeah. Clean shot's not too bad. So if pretty much whatever you actually shoot this thing past a chronograph, just record that temperature in here. Then if you shoot it at a very different temperature, and you happen to have a chronograph there, just shoot it past that thing, find out if you get like a big jump or a big decline or something like that, and you'll know if you have temperature sensitive powder. And then there's a bit more information that you'll have to do in here. Barometric pressure won't affect velocity right out of the muzzle because there's no air that the bullet is flying through to impact that thing quite yet.
For what we're doing, there's a lot of really detailed things that you don't have to necessarily pay attention to on the technical side for ammunition. Muzzle velocity is one of those that it kind of pays to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
It's a diagnostic sign of it's one of the first things you're going to see if something is awry.
If you hang out with a bunch of like PRS and NRL shooters, they shoot past a chronograph every time they zero their gun.
Yeah.
Because if they look down and they see a number that they don't recognize, they're like, ooh, something's going on.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was very averse to this for a long time. I actually would not like to testify to how long I hand loaded without ever checking a muzzle velocity. But now that I have access to the Garmin chronographs, and our group has one and our sister group has one, I usually shoot past two of them. Mm-hmm. But like if I'm on the bench, there's no reason not to be measuring that. It's so easy, and you would be, like I say, it's one of the first symptoms that something is changing, or it's going to be it's going to be the first red flag you get for a lot of things. So it is something that's good to pay attention to. It's worth the investment in buying one of those.
Yeah, the chronographs used to be a thing where you'd make like the special trip to the range to do some chronoing,
and the light had to be just right, and you needed a tripod, and it had to be plugged in. And
now that thing just lives in my range bag. Actually, Eric Seo borrowed mine. He has it right now, but bring it back, buddy. And then the last thing in here is zero offset. I honestly can't remember what this is for. Is this for...
Picture like M1 Garands. Like the C model M1 Garands when they mounted scopes on them and they're offset just a little bit off to the side.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool.
Or we have a function in geoballistics. If you have a zero shift from suppressed and unsuppressed, we have a muzzle device criterion. So essentially, we have one. You set one of them as like the default, and then with or without. So if you set the default as with, and then you put your suppressor on, and there's a suppressor shift, you can set that offset in there. So later, I'm shooting suppressed today. You select that muzzle device. I'm shooting unsuppressed today. I have that muzzle device, and it reads out your data that way.
That's pretty sick. Right on. Awesome. So that is it for ballistics data. Then you have some weather stuff. So once you get into here, basically what it's going to ask you for is temperature, humidity, and then depending on how you do it, you can either go with station pressure or barometric pressure. It will either ask you for just whatever the actual pressure is, or a combination of things to give you that. So the way that I run it is at a station pressure. So I actually carry around a little Kestrel, like not even the nice one. I bought like the cheapest one that has a little propeller in it to tell you wind speed and has a barometric pressure sensor in there. A lot of watches will do it, those kind of things. You can kind of pull from like the nearest weather station. For 3-gun, I think it's probably accurate enough. But those three things, temperature, you want to be pretty darn close to what you're at, give or take 10 degrees. Humidity, I literally leave it at 50%. It does not matter. I don't know why it's in the app. You can change it from 0% humidity to 100% humidity, and it will change your point of impact by like 1 inch at 1,000 yards. So for what we're doing, makes no difference at all. Barometric pressure past about 300 yards is really going to start to matter. It can be a very, very significant change. And this is one of the reasons that getting your dope back in the day was such a huge pain in the ass, because, barometers were, even worse than chronographs. Like most people didn't own a barometer. And so it was really hard to get that information. So all of a sudden you would just hit like 14 inches high at 500 yards and have no idea why. And it's because there was just like, the big barometric pressure change, a storm coming in, storm leaving, high pressure system, whatever it was. And but if you didn't actually have all of the data, you would just have like this mystery humongous shift and then just go spinning down the freaking wormhole trying to like chase this problem.
You have two options. You can pull this information from a nearby weather station like an airport, or you have a localized tool like a Kestrel that's measuring this and it's importing this information into your calculator.
Exactly. And most calculators that I've seen these days literally just have like a button that says, do you want us to just automatically pull this from the closest spot? And you can just select that. I use the thing that I bring with me just because I tend to shoot matches in places that don't have reception. But when I am close enough that I can actually pull from whatever the closest station is, I have never found it to be off by enough that it actually affects my point of impact to the extent that I could correct for it in the shooting positions that we deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So now,
check.
You officially have all of the inputs. You have put all of the things into your calculator.
You've put all the inputs in.
Yes, you have inputted all of the puts.
All the puts are in.
There's one last little thing that I believe all the calculators have these days, which is a validation process. So what that essentially is, so this is building a theoretical drop chart for your rifle. It will tell you how far your bullet is going to drop and how far it is going to get pushed in certain wind speeds. Reading wind is its own thing, which is art, not science. It's a little bit of science, but it's a lot of art. I think the last place that the long range shooters still kind of are wizards. The guys that can like look out at a landscape and read the wind like it's water flowing through all these canyons and stuff and come up with a number that makes sense and put that into their calculator and take that shot. That is a hard skill to learn, and it takes a lot of time.
The M157 can't read wind yet.
Yeah, exactly. So that is its own thing, but what you do need to do is validate that the drop that it is giving you is correct, because you put in a whole bunch of information and one of two things could happen. Thing number one is you could have put something in slightly incorrectly, which I have definitely done. And there's places in an app where you can just like put in a 1 instead of a 2 and lead to catastrophically wrong information. So you want to double and triple check that all this stuff is right. So part of it is just you're laying down to be like, okay, is this all right? The other part is the real world is just a little bit different than the numbers would tell us that it is. So it's pretty rare that the trajectory that your ballistics calculator gives you is exactly perfect at all distances and all pressures with all guns. What usually ends up happening is you start shooting, and as you go out, there will be a spot where the reality of what your gun is doing starts not quite matching what the calculator is telling you. Why that is? Maybe the side of the box said that you had a ballistic coefficient of something and it was off by, 3 numbers past the decimal. Or maybe your powder charge just burned a little bit hotter today. Or maybe the station pressure you pulled isn't the same as the pressure where you're at. It could be a million different things. But for whatever reason, you're just not hitting exactly, and I mean exactly, where it told you were going to be hitting. So there is a validation process that happens. And essentially what this is you are going to find a place where you can shoot your gun at basically the farthest distance that you can reasonably shoot your gun. You want it to be inside of transonic. So that is where your bullet goes from supersonic to subsonic, because when that happens, it kind of has a big disturbance and will do all kinds of crazy stuff. So you want it to be short of that distance, but you want it to be as far as you can reasonably shoot the gun accurately, given the equipment that you're working with and your skill set. So like for an AR, I try to do this at about 700 yards. For a 6.5 Creedmoor, I try to do this at about 1,200 yards. So you want to get as far as you can. If I don't have 1,200 yards to work with and I can get to 8, I'll take it. But the farther you can get, the better, because just like we talked about with zeroing stuff in earlier episodes, the more your bullet can deviate from its kind of pre-described plan into reality, the more information you have to make adjustments with.
The more pronounced the error, the easier it is to measure.
Yeah, for sure. So what you do is you basically shoot at a distance. You want a super solid shooting platform because you're basically bench rush shooting at this point. So you're not doing this off of a fence post. You're doing this bipod, rear bag, the whole shenanigans. And then there is a spot in all the apps that I know of where you can go into validation and you basically put in, hey, I shot it at 700 yards. It says I was supposed to come up 5.2. I actually had to come up 5.6. And you hit calculate, and it will change that entire arc to meet that. So it'll fix any errors anywhere between your muzzle and whatever that distance is, and also after because, it works in a big old arc. Mm-hmm. Some calculators have actually 2 or 3 different distances where you can put in more information, and it will kind of fine tune that thing a little bit. Whether or not that's necessary depends on the amount of accuracy that you need for the sport that you're playing. But that validation is basically the last step. I have never had a ballistics calculator be off by more than probably 7 inches at whatever the big distance is. So
it's 100.
Man, I'm gonna stop sneezing one day. No, so
I'm kidding. It's not 100.
Yeah, I think it's 700 yards. I've been off by 7 or 8 inches in an AR, and at 1,000 yards, I've been off by about the same. So it's not I'm off by a mil. I'm off by 0.3, something like that.
Yeah, there's 2 truing functions in geoballistics that I'm aware of. I don't proclaim long range shooting to be my passion, so I have a middle school understanding of this. But the first function we have is a velocity truing. So that would be working off of some estimated velocity. And then we shot it and we had some deviation. We could then plug in our deviation and it would correct our muzzle velocity. Mm-hmm. That's not recommended because we want to measure. If we have a true muzzle velocity, then we want to leave that alone. But a lot of hunters, it's a big ask. It's a big ask for them to sight in their guns. But it's a big ask to be hey man, you need a real muzzle velocity if you want to shoot at 600 yards. The next one would be BC truing, or ballistic coefficient truing. It was described to me by someone who is more passionate about this, that essentially ballistic coefficient is the sexy number that marketing kind of embellishes a little bit. Mm-hmm. So most bullet companies will give a slightly, if not maybe slightly fictitious estimation of what BC is. So that number that you pulled out of a bullet library, that's Hornady, Federal, Burgers, advertised BC for that bullet. But that is optimized on its best day. Now, what actually comes off the line when it's mass produced and all that stuff might change a little bit. So a lot of times truing your BC is what drags that line more into relation with what you're seeing in reality. So usually that's what I've been exposed to is, you shoot at whatever the max distance you have to work with so that you could see, because it's the same deviation at 200 yards, but it's very hard for you to see it and measure it.
Yep.
And whereas we're at all my numbers are made up, but if at 100 yards you see 1/4 of an inch and at 600 yards you see 6 inches, it's much more definitive to be yep, 6 inches off. We're it's off 1/4 inch. That could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
So that's where you want to see as much of a deviation as possible so that it's easier for you to measure. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those are all the parts.
Those are all the parts of a ballistics calculator. And then it'll spit out a chart for you.
Yeah.
Well, it'll do a couple things. It'll spit out a chart for you. So at yardage increments, it'll tell you what your drops are. So how far below your zero distance or above at some distances.
Yep.
You are. Or in geoballistics, paired with a rangefinder, it'll actually make a range card, which is what I use GB for most of the time. You roll up to the rock at Reveille Peak in Texas. You start lasing stuff, and it starts plotting them down on a Google map, like a Google Earth image.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And then it tells you your hold as well. So once you've built good data, it starts giving you some outputs as to what you can use for holds. And then you kind of go and do what we've talked about before. Once that you have a very precise hold for action shooting sports, then you're going to like, okay,
kind of round it off a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we start inserting round off errors and things like that. But you're trying to simplify it into something that's easy to remember. So,
Yep, for sure.
Other things on here, I know our interface has been improved a little bit, but a lot of its functionality with other weather tools, importing other reticles into the app. So not necessarily just Vortex reticles, but like our competitor reticles, or if we come out with a new reticle, putting it in there. Bluetooth compatibility, armory. So what guns you can have in there, how many guns you can have on board at a time, loading those into other devices and whatnot. But yeah, then ultimately it's spitting out either a heads up display, which is an elevation call, essentially a chart, which you're kind of looking at and evaluating, or a range card, which in geoballistics, the geo stands for map. So it's plotting it down on a Google Earth image. Here's the thing with long range. Long range means different things to different people. Most people, when they say long range, they're talking about 100 yards. To me, long range begins at 200 to 300 yards, and really, really long range is kind of like the discipline of long range shooting kind of begins at 600 yards plus. The kind of nitpicky stuff that Reiser was describing there really starts to matter beyond 600-700 yards, and really, really starts to matter beyond 1,000. A lot of people, 1,000 yards is an aspirational distance that they'll maybe shoot one day. Like, I swear I talk to people on the phone, like their bucket list thing is they want to shoot a bullet at 1,000 yards. I've done it a bunch of times, so like the mystique is gone.
Yep.
It's just math. You put in the math into the calculator, it shows you where to hold. You hold there, you hit it. But like for action shooting sports, a lot of that stuff isn't really the errors are gonna be inside of what the guns and the targets will tolerate. What you really want to make sure to have good luck with a ballistic calculator, you want to have accurate, like all the setup in what are the exact measurements of your gun, your twist rates, your height over bores, your offsets. You want a really good velocity number. Like that should be a moving target. You should have your finger on the pulse of what your velocities are doing out of your gun. And then you want a true to BC, because there's a little bit of marketing involved with BC. So you want a true to BC a little bit for best results. And then to some extent, you just have to go out into the world and shoot it.
Yep.
With that said, everybody, that's your long range lesson for today on the ballistic apps. Like I said, there are a few out there right now. If you are in the Vortex Nation, if you pair geoballistics with a Vortex product, you get the Pro Unlock for free, and it does a lot of this for you automatically, and it's doing even more of it automatically for you as every day that passes.
Not gonna lie, I think you might have sold me on that during this show.
Yeah, I'm kind of...
I haven't looked at one for a long time. I just like, oh, this is what I use, and I just kind of stuck with it.
We did this one off the cuff, and he started saying what app he used. I'm like, oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
But I think we might have converted him, folks.
Yeah.
We might have converted him.
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
Well, that said, keep those overlays handy, and maybe even a Kestrel if you're going to try some of this stuff.
Not a bad idea.
And we'll catch you all next time.
See you guys.